Stephen Graham, as a professor of cities and society, you're observing that our cities are becoming more and more vertical. How come? Why is that?
Well, there's several reasons. I mean, one is that population is still growing very fast in many of the countries of the world, in Asia and Africa and Latin America to some extent. And cities are growing very fast in those places because processes of urbanization are still at a stage of rapid growth. And when you have huge competition over ground in cities, huge price escalations in the price of ground, the price of land, it's logical for cities to expand vertically because it's people really want to be in the center. So for this reason, there's been a lot of vertical extension upwards. But I would also stress downwards. You know, the undergrounds of cities are getting deeper and deeper because that's where a lot of the infrastructures of the city are going.
You're arguing that we should focus more on the vertical layers of cities. What are these layers?
Well, I mean, the crucial point is to see that rather than being societies inhabiting just the ground level, we're living in what have been called stacked societies, where there are multiple layers going upwards above ground and also, as I said, downwards below ground. Above the city we have layers of air, bad air. You know, there are huge crises to do with hot and polluted air above cities, which are very much a layer. And then upwards again we have questions of the dronescape, worlds of aircraft mobilities, and right up into questions of the satellites that keep our digital lives going. Going downwards, we then have to consider, as I said, the infrastructures, the sewers, the subways, and so on, the basements, the bunkers, and also ultimately down into the really deep ground, the sites of all the resources that we exploit to sustain our societies, hydrocarbons, metals, and gold.
In your book, you're using the vertical layers of a city sort of as a metaphor for society. Why is that?
Well, there's a long history to this. I mean, if you look at the history of science fiction, going right back to H.G. Wells, Fritz Lang, the cyberpunk worlds of Blade Runner, maybe more recent sci-fi as well. Sci-fi always works, it seems, in vertical cities, where you have the subsumed, repressed workers deep on the street or below ground. You have the elites living in refuges high above the city. Sometimes the elites are living off the world altogether, like Blade Runner. But I want to stress that it's not necessarily just metaphor that I'm dealing with. There's a lot of evidence that the world's super rich elites are actually living aerial lives. They do actually inhabit the penthouses of the new towers. They do fly around, especially in cities like Sao Paulo, in personal helicopters transcending the ground level. They do have private aircraft that allow them to radically change the way they move around in the world.
So by moving higher and higher up, the rich are basically trying to leave the others behind. So it's some sort of status thing, isn't it?
Well, at the moment our world is facing a huge crisis of growing inequality. A huge crisis which is bound up with the type of capitalism that is dominating our planet at the moment. What's called a neoliberal type of capitalism organised around the market, absolutely. And those dynamics concentrate more and more wealth into fewer and fewer pockets. And the latest estimates from Oxfam are remarkable, suggesting that the top richest 20 people in the entire world own the same wealth as the bottom half of the world's population. So we do have a massive social crisis to do with radical or hyper inequality.
At this conference, we talked a lot about extended reality, virtual reality, augmented reality. What are the consequences for our cities of these technological developments?
Well, they're hugely important and hugely complex, I think. I think we need to move away from the perhaps 90s obsession that there was a separate virtual world which was entirely divorced from the real or physical world. What we're seeing is through the cloud, through augmented realities and so on, is the use of new media to change the landscapes and realities of the world, not to provide an alternative. Totally changing the way we access media and in communication and each other. But the physical world doesn't go away. the physical world is still very, very important and still the basis for so much of our lives. And I think we need to be careful that we don't underestimate the power of physical communication. You know, in this conference we have 300 people coming from all over Europe for a reason. The reason is that an online experience of the conference is a very, very poor substitute for the face-to-face reality. And there's a lot of evidence that face-to-face communication cannot be mediated in a satisfactory way. Although, of course, things like Skype and so on provide a better and better substitute.
Stephen Graham, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much indeed.